is starting. Okay, the stream is running. And now I will make the post. 2 photos worth seeing out. I hope it's out.
Oh, shit.
I hope it is out. Yes, post is on PWS. So we're already streaming, I guess. Now I'm waiting.
Alrighty.
Ernie. So nobody messaged me to talk with us about why we make photos. Did anyone message you?
Nope.
Nope. So I see we already have 7 viewers. Maybe one of the viewers wants to join this live video conversation on YouTube. If you want to do that, talk with us. Then just message Fern or me on Tumblr, and we will send you a link. And you click on that link, and it only works. It doesn't work with Firefox. I used to be working with Firefox. And Firefox told me that it's not possible anymore. So I'll have to. So it works.
Really?
Yeah, weird. But it works with Chrome definitely, and I think it works with all other browsers except for Firefox. And I stopped using Firefox completely because Firefox became incredibly slow over the last months. Yeah. And none of my add-ons work anymore. I only have 2 or 3 add-ons that I use frequently, and none of them work anymore because Firefox was completely rewritten. I heard. I'm not a programmer. I have no idea. So yeah. So in case you want to join this conversation, not only on the chat, we're of course also on the chat. You can chat with us. Let's see. Someone on the chat. Yes, we have. I see that the chat. Amy Montico is on the chat. Lyndon Arden's highlights is on the chat. Hello, all. And I think let's start. If you're during the stream, if you want to join, you can message us. We will send you a link. So no problem with that. So let's start, I'd say, right?
Let's start.
Hello to InConversation 15 in March. Is it March? Yes, 2018. And this time we'll have a really, I think it's a really interesting topic. Why do we make photos? And I think it will really kind of continue what we've been talking last time. And with me on the stream, and hopefully we'll be having a guest soon, because you can join this live video, of course, anytime. Just message either of us, Fern or me, on Tumblr. With me on the stream, like usual, Fernando, Dr. Fern, QBN-scholar on Tumblr, also admin of luxlit.tumblr.com and luxlit.net. And
you are?
My name's Pete. I like pictures, and I happen to be one of the admins of Photos Worth Seeing on Tumblr, and I also have my little.
And your Tumblr for photography, because you have like 3.
My tvoom.tumblr.com. That is tvoom.tumblr.com.
And tvoom, there's the other one.
I wanted to say, yesterday I posted a really tasty photo on my other photography blog, tvoom365. That is tvoom365.tumblr.com. So
yeah, now I don't know if I want to see that picture.
It is tasty.
Well, because when you like your pictures, when you don't like, well, I don't know about when you like, but when you get very humble and very, well, I don't know if it's that good a picture in your 365 Tumblr, I think the photography in there is amazing, and especially the ones that you're like, I don't know, and I'm like, you're stupid.
I know that.
Well, you are, but that's a whole other.
Yeah. So why do
Anyway,
why do you make photos, Fern? Or no, wait, we did
oh
in the
wow,
last two questions in the last two conversations we started. I always started with a question that I asked you. Let me start again with a question. Oh, I love that question. What is something that you've photographed, Fern, that is revealing, and that perfectly fits our topic today, that is revealing as to who you are as a human being? So what is something that you photographed that is revealing as to who you are as a human being? And I saw on the chat, Lyndon Arden's highlights wrote no video here. Can anyone confirm that there's no video on the chat? On let me check. I'll have the video. No, there is a video. I saw it. I checked on Photos Worth Seeing. We have video, so might be maybe it was a temporary problem.
well, you were having problems earlier
Maybe I
with
video. I checked the video streaming. So anyone else can confirm that we have video? Can the chat confirm that we have video? James Chrisley wrote, "Hello, video okay now." Okay, perfect. Thank you, James. So okay, I'll ask the question again because the video thing. What is something that you photograph that is revealing as to who you are as a human being?
You know, I'm going to fall back on what I said the other day and what I've said before about the whole idea of a photograph capturing a person's soul or a person's essence. I think in some of my people photography, maybe you can get a glimpse of who of a part of who I am. And I think in my photography, one of the things that I will say it does reveal a little is that what I've said 1,000 million times. I'm not creative in the sense that I have imagination. I do not have an imagination, or I have a very limited imagination when it comes to thinking up stuff I am, for all of the fact that I'm very much an airhead and very goofy, I am very analytical. And like I posted this morning, I'm fascinated by my glasses, and I will look, and I've taken several photographs, just took another one. I will see things. I will see things. And that is what then triggers what can be called my creativity. So it's not from imagination, it's from what I see. I'm also, as you know, extremely analytical, especially when it comes to the arts, and especially when it comes to the visual arts, which is one of my talents. I think I also am really good with the people photography, at communicating and at seeing something in most people. And the older I get, the easier it's getting for me. But I don't think there is anything that can reveal who I am. And I will say that for any photographer, any artist, any creator. I don't think, or anyone, I don't think any one specific thing you do or say, well, let's temper that a little, because I think there are some things that are said that if they're direct, this is who I am, you know, I then yes, you're saying it. But I think teasing out that from what we create or what we do or how we walk or whatever is impossible. And I think it can sometimes be dangerous because we can make assumptions that may not be true. Like the Mona Lisa and her smile. To me, I look at it and I think, oh, she farted and she thinks it's funny, you know, and that's what Leonardo caught at that moment. So it's such a personal, gets back to the whole objectivity thing about what we see and what we think and how we interpret yeah, that's my broader answer. I think there's a thing that you can see from some of my photographs, but I don't think you can see who I am as a person. See what I'm saying? Did that make sense?
To me,
that's a tough question.
It is a tough question. Definitely.
Well, and it's a tough question because, go ahead.
No, what struck me was that I think, I mean, the question is, and by the way, this question or this catalog of questions is by our show noter, Gia, who also always writes our show notes, and she sent me that list of questions, which I really love. And here's what struck me. I mean, the question is, what is something that you photograph that is revealing? During your elaborations, I realized that I'm not so sure if there's some. I mean, of course, sometimes that is dependent on the person. There might be something that we might say, yes, taking a photo of that, and I forgot to switch the camera, which isn't a bad thing because it's just me. Taking a photo of that is really me, but I think what's even more revealing, if we look at a couple of photos, like the body, maybe not the whole body of work, but really having a bit of an overview, the way we take photos of things. And that's something that I realized with my photography, that I quite obviously have a very specific view. I wouldn't say that I have a very special view or a unique view. I wouldn't go so far, but I think the way I take photos of things, of people, is or can be quite revealing about the type of person I am. And so and that's what I realized quite some time ago. And I was pondering a lot whether I really want to work on that in terms of, do I want to try something differently by really consciously taking photos in a different way or not? And I haven't come to a, or didn't come to a conclusion yet whether I really want to work against my view that I have. But on the other hand, I mean, you mentioned my other photography blog. I think the photos on there are quite different to what I post on TVOom. So
yeah, but you don't make them different consciously.
Right, I don't make them different consciously. That's a good way to describe it, because I think it's and that reminds me of one of the things that we talked about in one of the very early conversations about this web show. What was it about? Top Photographer or something, where this one said, yeah, that's because he was always taking photos from slightly above. And the question was, why do you do that? And he said, well, that's just my style. And if I personally, I'm very conflicted with something like people saying that is my style, because that conflicted in terms of whether I think that's a cool thing, or whether I think it's a pretentious thing, or whether I think it's something with which you really limit yourself. Because what I try to do is to take photos in a way that fits the subject. And I think my view, the things that I see, because I see different things than you would see if we were in the same place. And so I try to take the photos the way I perceive something, and that is not necessary necessarily the way I see them right now with my eyes, but how I perceive them in that situation, or even how I would want to see them. That's something in my photography that I realized, is that I take these types of photos that I would love to see, that, yeah, well, that I would love to see when I scroll down my dash. Not only this kind of photography, but you say, well, that's the way I would. These are the photos that I want to see, and that's why I try to make them, which is kind of interesting for me as a
That's
rebel.
interesting. I don't. Yeah, yeah, and that's an interesting take on it. I don't. That's interesting. I don't. But I will say and I don't think you participate in any of the challenges either, do you? Like the photo challenges and the abstract challenge and all that stuff.
Um,
Do you?
No, I don't. And there's I always want to, like with every photo challenge that I see, or every when we did the photo prompts on Let's Talk Photography, which are still on a hiatus because we still have we just don't have the time at the moment. But I think they will come back one day. We wanted to start them again in January, but maybe if things get a bit calmer, then we'll start again. Um, I did in the beginning when we started, when we still had No Edit Friday on PWS. When we started that, I frequently took part in that because I found, I mean, it wasn't my idea. We had this idea in uh, well, this idea somehow showed up, and I said, well, let's try that on PWS, right? And so it was something that I wanted to do, and so we said, well, why not put it on PWS as well? And the thing with me is, how can I put that? I find photo challenges, I think they're fascinating. I love to see what people come up with, especially the abstract challenge is something that always blows my mind when I see the results. Amazing stuff. And but for me, photography is rather a thing that to relax. And that's one thing that I realized lately, that my two driving forces are kind of like the biggest enemies that you can have. One is laziness, and the other one is kind of perfectionism. So because I'm terribly lazy if it comes to photography, and that's why I put a lot of time and effort into finding out how to do stuff with the least effort. And which is, I put so much time and energy into learning how to do things in an easy way that I sometimes don't have time for taking photos, which is what.
Wait, but is that being lazy, or is that getting to know your art and how to create it the way that is easier for you, so you don't have to think, so that it becomes second nature? To me, that's not necessary. The easy thing isn't being lazy, it's being intelligent. Heaven help me, I just called you intelligent, but it's being intelligent because you know, the better you know something, as Fred Astaire who most of you, probably none of you know who he is because I'm the oldest person in the world,
No.
but Fred Astaire, oh, you know, one of the most graceful dancers on film and on Broadway, said one time, the most rehearsed gesture is the most natural one, because it becomes a part of who you are, that repetition and that knowing. So I don't think that's lazy at all, personally.
Yeah, but it turns out to be not lazy, but the idea is laziness, because I say, okay, I want that, and for me, it's really, I see something, um, and I want to have a certain result, right? And I do have a bit of background knowledge, and so I know how to get that result, which sometimes is connected with a lot of work, especially if you do portrait photography. I mean, if you go out in is to landscape photography, there's what either you take you it, okay let me take a step back. If you do landscape photography, like, how can you do it? There are a million ways how to do it. You can take your big heavy tripod with you and all the gradient filters to put in front of your lens, and you can do all of that while you are there, and it takes a lot of time to set up all your stuff. And what I do is, most of the time I shoot freehand, and I'll just take three, four photos, and then sometimes I make different exposures and compose them together with HDR. And there are a lot of HDRs on my blog that you probably wouldn't recognize as HDRs, because um, I just try to get every piece of information that I can into my shots and combine them later. So because for me that's much less work than carrying a heavy tripod with me and getting filters and attaching the filters and checking it. So there's this I, I certainly wouldn't make these photos if I couldn't make them in an easy way. And so I think I'm lazy. Sometimes I would. I mean, we talked about that last time. Sometimes I go out at night, freezing cold, and walk around 2 hours and get home like shivering. I do that as well, but then I sit at home and say, okay, I like the result or don't like the result, like last time. How can I have that much easier without freezing half to death? And so this is, I want the photos, but I don't want to work for them. And so I work for learning how to not work, which is, well, maybe not lazy, but the idea is laziness.
Oh, okay. So getting back to your point about, what was it, that photography helps you relax? Um, that kind of bridges and connects with the whole idea of photography and the spirituality of it. And it can be, by spirituality, I'm not, and I think we both agree on this, it's not religion, it's not any sort of dogma. It is the personal balancing and connection with whatever your beliefs are. Because you can,
can I say one sentence? And I don't want to,
sure.
but there's a thing about, I would consider myself to be a very spiritual person, but for me, this has nothing to do with any kind of religious, at least not the basics. Well, the basic idea of spirituality is for me just common sense. And there's, if you Stephen Hawking passed away last week, so perfect connection to that. If you read all of that, and I did a lot of research in the last years about well, I read Hawking, I read Neil deGrasse Tyson, all of these people. Mickey, I forgot the name. Yaku, what's and watch a lot of videos on YouTube. And if you look at that, there's not so much difference to religious texts, because science. I don't understand this why science would be kind of the opposite of religion, and basically all say the same. The only thing is that some religions say there's one God and he gives us rules and we have to obey them, but all the rest, all that underlying idea, everything comes from something, right? There's no there
Yes.
there was a beginning, and something must have caused that beginning. What that was, that is, you can fight over that, and people did for centuries. But there's spirituality for me is nothing that is in any way m- automatically metaphysical or has to do with religion. It's what you said. It's finding the balance and finding your place in this world, and finding the mechanics, right? How everything works, and that is certainly different.
Well, I think it goes. I think it goes beyond that, and I think that's why it's really interesting, because we've talked about this a little in private. I am more and more. I mean, I'm still I'm still Catholic light. I will always be Catholic. I think I will always be Catholic. In part, I will also say, because I don't know if it was because it was the 70s, the late 60s, early 70s. God, I'm old. But I don't know why, or I was just blessed in that sense. But the people who helped me, opened me up to the way the Catholic faith and religion and all of that, they were very much broader than the way it's usually perceived, and they were very much into the more specific aspect of love and of acceptance, and not so much, oh, you know what I mean, because because we're different than you are, and our faith is great. There was a much more inclusive way of presenting our faith to me. So a lot of the stuff that I still live by is based on what I learned, because my life keeps reinforcing what I learned. Perfect example, strangely enough, and it relates to photography of all things, now that I think about it. One of the heroes in my life is man who was a brother of LaSalle. He was in a religious order, religious teaching order. Coincidentally, I love teaching. And he eventually, when I was, I think, 17, 18, 19, he, at the age of 50, went into the Trappist order, which is a religious order that's a monastery order. It's there, they have a vow of silence and a vow of working for the community, and everybody around me thought he was insane, because this guy was highly powerful in the Archdiocese of Miami. And this guy, I know I am a very hyper personality, made me, because he passed away a few years ago, made me look like I was asleep. This guy was electric, and he just had this personality that was just amazing. He also looked like one of the termites from Mars in an old Woody Woodpecker cartoon. Yeah. And I actually told him one time by mistake, and he just loved it. He had a wonderful sense of humor. Anyway, I remember there was all these rumors and all these things about, oh, he's such a fool, that's bullshit, he's going to drop out in a couple of months, he's not going to be there long enough, he's got this personality, he's used to a position of power, he's too fucking old. So anyway, I just even at that age, I started to think, just go to the source. So I went to the source, I went to him, and I knew him a little, but I didn't know him. I mean, we didn't have a relationship per se of any kind, but he would teach some of the lessons on how to teach Sunday school and that kind of thing, that I went to a couple of times. And I said, dude, I'm hearing all of this stuff. I don't understand what's going on. So he said, let's have lunch one day. And we went to this cheap Chinese Cuban restaurant in the middle of Flagler, the middle of Little Havana, almost in the heart. And part of the reason I wanted to talk to him too, by the way, was because at that time I was contemplating going into the same order that he was part of at the time, the teaching order. And I've always been attracted, I'm very attracted to the monastic lifestyle, the silence, the deep spirituality of it. And so we had lunch, and one of the things, he explained to me, I'm a great believer in just following the signs of the times. And he told me this, he related it to the biblical story of, and I can't remember the guy's name, who has the fight with the angel and he wins. And then the angel says, okay, you won this fight, but I'm going to touch your ankle and you're going to have the weakness there because you may have won this battle, but you don't win the whole thing because this is the way life will always tell you to go. So to this day, I'm very much aware. I try to be aware of what life is telling me and where it's telling me to go. This ties into the photography because and again, I've said this 1,000 times, this is my third time doing photography. The first 2 times with SLRs, and I was horrible at it. I didn't even think about learning stuff. I just thought you pick up a camera and take pictures, and they're excellent. And eventually, the pictures sucked. The pictures were horrible. And I've gone through, and it's like, let's get rid of all this shit. So what's his face was right. And plus, I'm not a film person. I know that. Digital photography is the way. And getting my baby, the D50, my first baby, was totally a coincidence. A friend of mine had a camera, $200, used camera for sale. And I didn't even think about, is it a Nikon? Is it a Canon? Is it this? Is it that? Is it new? I just thought $200, single reflex digital camera. I have the opportunity. I'm already getting interested in photography again because I was taking photographs with my BlackBerry Curve. That's so funny to me. And I thought, just buy it. Just buy it. And it's opened up a whole it was perfect time because of the research that I've done, and part of my PhD is all about visual media and analysis and blah blah. So it's this just coming together, and photography still does that to me in a lot of ways, whether it's just taking the photograph itself or in the way I communicate with people, the opening up to people, which I just wrote about the other day, which for someone like me who's depressive with a side of suicide, that's one of the issues that I have, that I tend to withdraw and hide and want to curl up in a corner and die. And yet photography opens me up to stuff like this. You know what I mean? It opened me up to, I'm going to be meeting up with another Tumblr photographer next weekend. I've met 5 already. I'm going to be going to other places and meet, and the communicating on Tumblr, which I've written about so many times. I love it. So to me, all of that ties into the spiritual place where I am now. And I'm going to start getting emotional, if I already started getting emotional, because part of my journey now is learning more and more about Buddhism, which doesn't negate, that's one of the things I love about Buddhism, that it doesn't negate your religious core beliefs. It just builds on them. And I'm a big fan. Actually, I have this latest. I'm a big fan of hers. I love her. I love Pema Chodron, who is I want to say 83 or 84. Fascinating person. Stuff by her on YouTube. I highly recommend. And it's all about being aware and again, sort of following those very same principles I learned in the 70s, but making them more human, filling them with loving kindness, helping me find balance. I haven't been through a good bout of depression in like a couple of months, and that scares the shit out of me. But photography is a part of this. It's because it's something that, like, you getting back to what you said, which is what brought all of this up to me. The very fact that When I am taking a photograph, like last night, the 7-day challenge, which I'm doing because I got challenged again. Apparently somebody thinks that I need to practice my photography because I'm not good enough. This is my third black and white challenge. And I just saw the shadows on something. It might not be a very public. The picture I posted, I don't know if you saw it, of the photographs that my mother has on her kitchen table, in her breakfast table. That's just like 7 or 8 pictures of me and my sisters that are old pictures. One of them is my old Cuban passport photo from when I came to this country. And there's another one on the right, which is a very faded Polaroid of me and my sister when we were like late teens, early 20s. And yes, I had hair. And I was thin. It wasn't cute, but I was thin. I see that, and at that moment I think, and again, it's where my lack of imagination comes in, but my visualizing stuff and my seeing comes in. I saw it, I thought, great photograph, not very popular, but that's okay. I love it. It speaks to me. It's a lot of white space, as somebody pointed out. But to me, it says something. And sometimes you have to photograph for the art, and sometimes you have to photograph, to me, for yourself, like the family portraits and, and that kind of thing. Which I'm thinking of, which I'm doing gradually, if I go into the professional sphere, will I share some of those personal photos? No, because I understand that they're not the kind of stuff that they're not. For my personal stuff, I'm going to choose, as Tony Northrup said the other day, your 12 photos, your 12 iconic photos, if they're personal, fine. If they're not personal, fine. I know I have several photographs that are bankable, that I know are art. The picture of my mom, with my nieces, with my niece, it's a gorgeous portrait, but it's not something that might go in there. You know what I mean? It says a lot to me. That photos and that white table. It's something at that moment, that spirituality of connecting and doing and just being in the moment. That's the other thing. And I think we all experience that when we're taking pictures. And it actually also goes back to what I posted about adjusting to my baby. When I pick up, and I was talking to my friend Steve, who I work with and who has my old D5500. When I pick this up and I look through here, and I'm thinking about, I don't think about like what you were saying. I don't think about the specifics. I don't think about challenging myself. There's this moment where everything fades, and it's just, wow, that is so cool. Let me see what I can do, and let me take and let me make adjustments or whatever. But it's all about that communication with that. Okay, so that to me is a part of that spirituality too, because the more I'm able, in a broader sense, to be aware of the moment. When I grab this, it's like it's like I'm elevated. I'm flying. It's just an amazing experience. So yes. So anyway, that's it. That was too much. I'm sorry.
That's there are like 5 things in there that I thought, okay, we can bring that back to photography. But what you said in the beginning, or really in the beginning, about Fred Astaire, the most rehearsed. I disagree with him if it's about that. And yet agree with him because, well, as a theater guy, I know what he meant, and it can be easily misunderstood because sometimes you can over rehearse things.
Yes.
So then they will become artificial again. But I agree with sentiment. The thing though is, and that's I think why it's so. One reason why it's so important for me to really understand the mechanics of photography. And by the way, I'm currently working on a series about the mechanics of photography, and it's mostly for me. And I thought I might share it, and I, of course, will make it in a way that it seems that I'll be doing it for other people, and that I'll share what I know, but it's basically really for me because I really have to focus and I have to take bits out, and so I'll be. I hope there will be the first video out soon on my YouTube channel. Um, but that's what I realized, that the more I know about how that whole thing, photography, works, and the more I absolutely see it the same way. You have to practice photography, and not only, and that of course is the most important part of that all, practice seeing, really looking at your own photos later. And I think that is one of the most wonderful things that we have now with all that digital possibilities. We just import the photos into our computers and play with them later, cut them, crop them, turn them around, change contrast, change exposure later, and then we see what is all in a shot. And that is all something that will get inside of us. And the next time when we're in a similar situation, we not only have that one picture in mind that could happen, but we have this whole variety that we have, and that's something what I also love about photography is that we're constantly making decisions, consciously or not, and we decide we'll take the photo that way, and but then we think maybe it looks differently in a bit, if it looks better, or in another way we just take that other shot because it doesn't matter. Well, we don't have only that 24 or 36 photos on the film, but we can put like 100, 200, 600, 1,000 photos on an SD card, which is and I've thought about, I mean, I have 3 analog cameras here. I sometimes use them, but I find analog photography extremely tedious for that
Oh,
special reason that for every shot that and I get the notion. I don't say this is a bad approach. Don't get me wrong. This is a different approach for me, for my way of approaching photography. Analog photography is really exhausting because I have to think all of the time. And I taught myself over the last 8 years or so to not having to think. I now set my camera intuitively, because I'm out there. I know that I developed a feeling for light. I developed a feeling for what kind of white balance do I need here? What might look better? Do I, especially, it's something. Also, I learned that by playing around with the photos later in Lightroom. You can just simply, if you have a raw, right, you can choose the different white balances, because even if it's daylight outside, using the daylight white balance might not give you that feeling that you want to. And use shadow, or use cloudy, and you have the slightly warmer picture. And so that's what I developed over the last, well, about 8 years. That and I but if I feel with analog photography, I feel totally stuck, because yes, of course, I can't change the white balance, of course, but I can do a lot of other things. But I always have to think, okay, we did that, and I did that. What type of film do I have in the camera? Okay, is it ISO 100, or no? Is it a 400? Okay, so um, that's the thing. Coming back to Fred Astaire, um, as soon as you can completely shut your head off and not think anymore, but just do it. And my photos turn out most of the time, with just my intuitive settings, turn out the way I want them in terms of these are the base. But for me, photos that I get out of the camera are almost never the finished photos. There's always what I do during photography is making my bricks that I build a house with later. So I always produce raw material because that's just what I want to see. Well, this is my approach, and this is just I don't say my approach is better. It's just my personal approach, and that's what I share on my YouTube. That's one way how one can do stuff. And if it works for you, perfect. And I'm glad and I'm happy if what I show helps people to see things differently. And if you don't like it, then don't watch it, right? It's
well,
and so what? Let me finish that. And for me, that's what you described. It is something I can absolutely relax with photography. I mentioned it last time. I'm not the person to constantly look for a scenery or for something that I take photos of, and that's a largely different thing. In the last 3-4 years, I photographed a couple of weddings, and there's when you're constantly on the lookout for photos. I need a photo of that. I need a photo of that. Do I have this? And we have these lists, either really physical lists. Okay, we have the bride, the groom,
really,
bride's parents. Yes, of course. Because they want photos of each person who was at the wedding. Okay, I need the wedding rings. Do we have? And it's a fantastic challenge in terms of you learn a lot and you have to be focused. Like I was that one wedding, I really was there like 12 hours of shooting, and you're exhausted, and I was flat for like 2 days later. It was an amazing experience, but that's not relaxing, and I'm happy with the photos. But that's kind of a job in terms of I need to produce photos, and the stuff that I do on my blog, that I show on my blog, is photos that I relax, right? Okay, oh cool, how take photo of that landscape. So that's my way of. And there's a question, I guess, why do we take photos other than it makes us feel good? In terms of, is it most of us start, I guess that's how I started again with photography, because I wanted to conserve memories. I had the possibility to go to Kenya for almost 2 weeks, and I said, okay, if I go to Kenya, then I will have to bring home photos because I want to see them 10 years later, and maybe I also want to brag a bit about what I saw, so I need proof for that. So, and my photos are not really like, I made like, I don't know how many, 3,000 photos, and like 15 of them are worth bragging. But I think
that's
there's
pretty
more.
good, by the way.
Yeah, especially since it was the first time after like 10 years or something that I really used my cameras for taking photos, for photography, not just snapshots. And I think that's one way, but there are so many different ways why we would want to take photos other than just conserving. It's what you mentioned with the photos of your teenage years, your childhood. Yes, these are memories, but there's so many different reasons why we would want to take photos and why we take photos. And well, I never I was never interested in, and I'm still not, and there's nothing that I do is to try to make art. I just take photos of what I think is cool, right?
But that's interesting because I when I started pretty much taking pictures of what I thought was cool, and most of it was the plant life in our conservatory and the university, our botanical conservatory, which I still go back to every once in a while. And also in the greenhouse, which is they're both about a block away from where I work. So I can walk over there anytime and take all kinds of pictures from that. But it wasn't a need to create art. It was just the calling that I see this, I see it's beautiful, I want to take a picture of it. And I also want to add something, because I'm glad you brought up, the post process and all of that. To me, and I've said, again, it's something I've said before. Go ahead.
Can I say one thing? And I think this
Yeah.
is really, this is important. This was my personal biggest revelation in photography that I had. Funnily enough, I came to that thought through Billy Monday, who once sent me a message on my blog, and we had Billy on the show last year, which was a delight, and it was really amazing because I'm really really big fan of his work, and and after the show, after I had this pleasure to be talking with him, also big fan of him as a person. Um, the biggest change, the biggest revelation for my photography that I realized was, and it was something that happened. That's also, well, spirituality, where we're just constantly evolving, constantly changing, and was that I stopped taking photos of things or of people. I started to take photos of a scenery. I started to take photos of light, of shadows, of shapes. And that's what happened. What happened with me, I don't know if that is the case for everyone, but that was what was what happened automatically. Because if you're seeing photos like every day, and I work, even though I don't really post a lot lately, I work every day on my photos, and I check old photos and I make new photos. But it's, if you see photos every day and you work with them, not only while taking, but post processing, and then we can go back to that, um, you suddenly start to not see a person, a photo of a person or of a tree or of a mountain, but there's suddenly more there. You start to see things in a more abstract way. You see shadows, shapes, colors, and then, and that was for me the case, that was the next step. Then suddenly I saw emotions, and that's when things got really crazy for me. And I think it was last year, and I made a video about that. You will not find that on YouTube, but only on my blog, which was, and back into spirituality, was really a crazy experience when I tried to transform the feeling that I had during that special occasion into a photo. I wasn't really specifically talking about that, but the video is about that. If you want to check it, it is called Spirits.
Oh,
Back to post processing. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I thought it was important.
no, that's fine. Because in a sense, I'm glad you brought all of that up, and you brought up the spirituality, because to me, when I talk about photography, granted, I was talking about picking up the camera and working with it, but really, as I've said before, to me, photography is the whole process. And like I fall into that same sense of suspended serenity and balance when I'm doing the camera raw stuff, and doing post process, when I'm doing lux lit and going through the photographs, when I'm on my dashboard and I'm looking at the images, and on and on and on. So to me, it's not just this, which is why I personally have never and can't see myself doing like a 365-day challenge. I'll do the 7-day because it's just 7 days, but because it's more than just focusing on taking the photo. For me, it's about everything else, and all of those steps and all of those different components of what is photography. Although I have to say, do give me that spiritual sense of that.
A couple of very fascinating comments in the.
Go for it.
I just want to mention.
I was wondering. I don't want to talk that much. Go.
No, I didn't want to. I just want to tell the guys and girls on the chat that we haven't forgotten you, and we will definitely come to that. So I didn't want to interrupt you, but there was just a lot of going on the chat at the moment, so I had to.
On YouTube.
On YouTube chat. So maybe let's I already said hi to Amy and Lyndon Arden's highlights, and I mentioned James, but there is also Marie back on the chat like last time. Sharon is on the chat, and Jen is on the chat. So hello to all of you. Latest hello. And we have this wonderful comment by Amy. And I think that is something a lot of people can connect with. I certainly can. Amy wrote, "For me, photography is a creative outlet. It's something I crave and need to do to fill the hole." Like a lot of things. And I really think, and we should talk about that, I guess, that isn't that something that's also a very, very spiritual approach? Because what is it that we need other than our daily routine of getting up, drinking coffee, going to work, coming home, eating, and going to bed, right? Sharon writes, "For me, photography is a combination of creative outlet and relaxation, as in when I'm doing that, I am not thinking of anything else at all. Same for gardening, and photography ties into that nicely." And yes, Jen, Nature Lover 69 is the blog. Sharon's blog, Sharon B Photos, and Amy's blog, Amy Montico, and Lyndon Arden's highlights is Lyndon Arden's highlights. And James's blog is Jelly Tussle. Did I forget some? I think we have all. I think I have all of them. Yes. And oh, Fern writes on the blog, "Howdy everyone. I will shut up for a while. Love your comments." What I think, what came to me today while thinking about that whole subject, while I was loading the dishwasher this afternoon, is if we think about it, if we think about making pictures, creating pictures, if we look at mankind, it all started. I have, correct me if I'm wrong, but I have this sort of feeling that there was this movement towards becoming more and more and more and more realistic. We started out with I don't know, cave paintings, cravings, carvings, not cravings, carvings in caves and paintings, and everything was very stylized. And but it wasn't, and that's also something that I guess probably a lot of people don't really understand, that this stylization was not because they couldn't do it any better. There was a reason for that. And especially if we look through art history, if we look into medieval paintings, that all was very, very stylized, but that there was a reason for that. And then there was
well, go ahead. Wait. But I think there's yes, but I think there's also specifically, for example, when you go to like the cave paintings, there's also the fact that and it's funny, the trajectory of that sort of artistic expression and creation, in a sense, mirrors the way I think of our trajectory of our lives. And when during the cave paintings, the technology, the very core of how you saw things, it was just a form of expression, which I think we all have. I think we all have a need to express ourselves.
But maybe I worded that wrong, but there was never that. I mean, if you look at that, if you look at these, maybe not the cave paintings, but later, if you look at how things were depicted, there was no. Or let me take a step back. If you take a look at pictures kids paint, there's a reason why heads are bigger than bodies.
Because kids' heads are bigger than their bodies.
That's maybe one reason. But even if they paint their parents, and it's there's no sense, and there's no need for realism in terms of what we really see, but there's a lot more about how things are perceived. If we look at people, usually what we the first thing, and even though often, especially guys, are told that they look somewhere else. But the first thing that we look at are the eyes. We try to connect with the eyes. That's why it's a rule in portrait photography to focus on the eyes, because if the eyes are not in focus, then something seems off. So this is not a rule in terms of one of my pet peeves, photography rules. It's not a rule because someone said it has to be done that way, because there's a reason for that. Because the first thing we do when we take a look at a portrait, the first thing we automatically, instinctively do is we try to connect with that person by looking into their eyes, if the eyes are visible. So if the eyes are out of focus, something seems off, even if we don't really realize that. So we remember, usually we remember people's faces, and so that's what's bigger in our minds, and therefore there's no we are taught, if we go to art school, we are taught to paint people, to draw people with the right proportions and everything, so that everything is fine. But there's a very different approach, or can be a very different approach, if that's also something that came later, again, um, that we have a much more direct, let me call it emotional approach, to creating pictures. And over the centuries, it seems that things became more and more and more realistically. There was perspective, etc., etc. And I see what I wanted was the main idea behind that. What I wanted to come to is the same thing. Suddenly there was photography. One click, and it seems we have reality there. And we had then we had this kind of movement towards abstract reality, photography. What can we do with that? And then was again the next wave. There's always a movement and a counter movement, right? And we have this hyper reality, and then people complain about things are too real. We have that with um, the movement from analog photography to suddenly digital photography became more. We have more details. Everything is cleaner. Everything is yeah, hyper real.
Right.
And I'm curious what will happen next, if there's something. I mean, in movies we have 3D that which is always sold as something new, which was one of the first techniques ever. Was
Well, it's funny. It's funny
I'm
because,
curious what will happen next. Or if,
well, you never know. Again, I guess it's part of my spirituality. I'm worried less and less about that. But I will say it's really interesting that at the beginning of photography, there were two concurrent movements, if you will. There was the very almost one of the first women photographers, if not the first woman photographer, and one of the very first photographers, if I remember correctly, was this woman who took these very clinical, precise photographs of of flowers and plants and leaves and all that very much mimicked the kinds of images that were in science books and so on, to show what all of that looked like. Yet there was this realism, if you will, and then eventually in what was it, the turn of the century, turn of the 1800s to the 1900s, of the very fantasy and staged photography that I think Imogen Cunningham was a part of, as a matter of fact, that was very much the classical Greek style of posing people, and that was an image, a movement. And then there was the other movement, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, again, Ansel Adams and others were part of. So I think, but the difference to all to that, as opposed to, and I'm not going to go back to the cave paintings. I'm going to go back to the child, which to me, they're basically the same thing. You're at the very beginning. You want to express what you see and
Sorry,
go ahead.
Fern was talking about Anna Atkins.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Sharon. You want to express, what, but then when you start as a child or the cave paintings in the progression of humanity, and in different places, because it depends on humanity, where humanity was and in the location. But the bottom line is, you start getting more into the culture, you start understanding more, you start communicating more, you start being more involved with your environment, and then all of these other things happen. And then there's these movements and all these things. What's interesting to me, and why I don't even really worry about that question, there's two things. One of them is in our contemporary society, there's so many different ways of communicating and of expressing what we see, photographically or in any art, that are appreciated. They may not be, and this is where I see myself, they may not be mainstream in the sense of, usually most people like, the cat pictures. Most people like the gorgeous landscape photographs. I don't do that. And I know that my photography is good. I know that I get positive feedback from people who appreciate it. So that's fine, and I think that's, and again, that goes actually part of, now that I think about this, to the spiritual world, spiritual aspect of this. For me, it's the finding and accepting, this is where I am. I can navigate, I can expand, but and it goes back to what you were saying about the challenges and so on, and about being comfortable with where you are. I'm comfortable with where I am as a creative. Am I trying new stuff? Every once in a while, yes, like buying a new camera, or when I was photographing with the Fuji, the little Fuji. It's just a 35 millimeter fixed lens, but I'm happy, because, and I'll go back to the quote I brought up last time, style is a product of knowing your limitations, I think. And I know what my limitations are, and within those limitations, I have a lot of ways of experimenting and changing. Plus, I just really honestly feel good while I'm doing it. I disappear into what I'm doing. I become one with what I'm doing. So I'm going to keep doing it. Because and by the way, a big part of that, being one with that too, is also the learning, which I think we often overlook. And it's not just the learning about the technical, it's what we've talked about so often. And really, we barely ever talk about the technical here. We talk about all of the other stuff. So yeah, anyway, it still all goes back really to that spirituality, that sense of balance.
Yeah, we have a comment on the chat. Marie writes, agree, photography, music, gardening, mosaic, fill a hole, quiet my soul for a while. You focus, hold your breath, wait and watch and wait. Lovely, peaceful moments. That is really a thing. I don't know if that is a thing in the US. Here's it's definitely something in Germany. I presume it's a Europe-wide thing. And the Japanese tourists. In terms of, there's people always joking, and not in a mean way, about these buses with Japanese tourists who make these Europe trips, Europe in 3 days or something, and they
but those are the Americans too.
Take
Europe in 3 days, baby.
Yeah, but they take photos and then relive their holiday at home with the photos. And I thought back, as in a time when I wasn't really that much into photography. I also thought, what's the deal with that? Why don't you just enjoy where you are? And what's the photo thing? And I once overheard a conversation of two elderly women on a train, and it was, I wrote it down because it was hilarious. It was, I hope I can get it, still have it in my in my head, and I can translate it because it was in German. And one of them told a story that she experienced at the Louvre in Paris, and she was talking about Japanese tourist who was there taking photos of all the pictures and statues. And then she bragged about that, told the other woman who was with her, and said, and then I went to him and said, little man, put that camera down and look. And she was so proud of that. And I had really tried very hard to not laugh at that moment. And then later, I thought, a couple of years later, this conversation came back to my head, and I thought, well, I'm the same, right? I walk around with my camera to take photos of everything that I like, and I really asked myself the question whether I'm not enjoying the moment and just being into photography and trying to get photos. But the first thing that I realized was it doesn't matter at all. If I enjoy that, right, then it's my time, it's my joy, it's my pleasure. Who cares other than myself? And if I put myself under, or if I would put myself under stress, then it's also my problem and not anyone else's. But then it got even better because I realized, what do I do when I'm somewhere? I look much closer than most people. And I don't say that I'm a particularly good photographer, but I realize that I look at the world in a very, very different way than, say, 10, 15 years ago, because I look at the world in with a let's say photographic view. I see way more beautiful things, wonderful things, weird things, strange things, things that make me think when I'm home later. And of some of them, I took photos, of others, I didn't. And I realized that it doesn't even matter for me anymore whether I took a photo of something or not, because I saw it, I lived it in that moment. And there was this one experience that I had, it wasn't too long ago, when I had my camera around my neck on the neck strap, and I said, okay, I have to go to groceries and I have to go buy food, right? And so I went in there and had my little how do you say, trolley? Is that
Shopping cart.
shopping cart? Right. Thank you. And it was filled, and I went to pay, and I put everything on that whatever it's called, right? And the woman at the counter looked up and said, "Well, I'm closed." And I said, "Oh, sorry, I didn't see that. I'm sorry." And she saw my camera, and then she said, "Are you a photographer?" And I said, "Well, hobbyist photographer." And she said, "Yeah, no, leave your stuff here. Like the next one, it's closed for the next one." Because photographers fascinate me. They see more, which was a nice compliment, and it was hilariously funny in that moment because I didn't see that it was closed. Okay, but and um, I don't know if she meant it as a joke. I don't think so. But that's when I went out of the shop. Um, that was when I realized, like, I really do see more, because automatically you look around and you scan the whole environment, and not necessarily what can I take photos of, but you just look closer.
Right.
And that is, for me, was that big change also about the Japanese tourists, because I say, well, they certainly know more or have seen more of my own hometown than I did, and all the 40 years, right? That I've been wondering. Well, I've not wondering, 39 years wandering around, because the first year I couldn't walk, wandering around that town. And they definitely saw more in these 3 days than I saw all my life. And that's a great thing. If I'm
Well, but you know, and it's funny because the whole Japanese tourist thing, you made me think of Susan Sontag's photography, which I do find rather dense in at times. And I know for me, it was kind of like dull and a little like extrapolating too much, but some things, and the whole thing of like now with people, which of course she doesn't talk about because this was written like 20, 30 years ago, maybe even longer. You know, the whole idea of people now with their cell phones taking pictures of everything. You know, 40, 50, 60 years ago, you had the brownie cameras and everybody was taking pictures of everything, and everybody, you know, the slideshows of your vacation and all that stuff. So it's not just the Japanese tourists, I have to say, like you said. But to me, the bottom line is it almost in a way goes back to the objectivity thing. This is the way you see things. This is your standpoint. Whether it's open or it's broad, whether whatever it is, this is where you are. God love you. That's it. And again, going back to the spirituality thing of it, on the one hand, I can understand. On the other hand, that's not where I am. Let's move on. You know, I mean, it's just. But I do have to tell you, I totally agree. And there's two things that you made me think of. When I had especially when the first time I had my camera, I had an SLR, horrible pictures, mostly at home, and horrible, mostly in Miami, of friends and people, horrible. The second time I had an SLR I bought it right before I moved out to California. And I had it for, I want to say, about 3.5, 4 years. And I went to some interesting places. And one of the places I went to was for the 50th anniversary of Area 54 in, what's the name of that town where in 1954, when the flying saucers landed, it's in Arizona. Yes.
Now, finally confirmation. They really landed, Fern.
No, I'm not confirming, but there's the little town of
the sources landed. That's what.
Yeah, well, but there's the little town of Rockwell, not Rockwell.
Roswell.
Oh shoot, Roswell. Thank you. They had a 50th anniversary parade and all that stuff, and I happened to see this on that. I missed it by a week. I happened to see it on MTV. I was able to get a really cheap flight into Arizona, and I drove pretty much all around Arizona, including Miami, Arizona, if I'm not mistaken. There's a Miami, Arizona. I took pictures. I have gone through those photos, and they're horrible. But you know what? I still think about that trip. I still think about being in Roswell. I still think about and the memories are there. The memories are there. The thrill of being in the town of Socorro, which the day before I had seen Contact, which is about, in part takes place in Socorro. It's the movie with I can't remember her name, about contacting the
Contact?
Yes, Contact, which is a brilliant movie. And the next day, there I was, you know, in the town. I didn't see the antennas. So all of those memories are there for me. All of those memories. The pictures suck horribly. They both suck and blow, but the memories are there. And that's eventually what's gotten me to think what you were saying. Again, we've talked about this before. I don't care. I took a picture of it, fine. I didn't take a picture of it, fine. I went, I saw, I have the memories. And the other photography-related memory I have, and I didn't take a picture of this, the first time I went to New York, I've been to New York twice. One of the things I did was visit the Museum of, I think, Modern Art. And I stood face to face with the classic portrait of Greta Garbo, where she's sitting there just like this. And to me, Greta Garbo was for a while someone who I there were things about her as a person that I'd read that I really admired. And being in front of that photograph was just, I mean, to me, there was just something and just amazing. What's the photographer's name? A famous Hollywood portraitist. But there was just something about being in front, in the presence of that photograph. And not just because it was a Garbo, but because of the image itself. It's such a gorgeous, and now that I think about it, holy fuck. I think about it, that sort of I'm having a moment here. Oh my God, that kind of photography and that kind of
desk.
Huh?
Nothing.
That kind of portrait is what, I don't know if I'm trying to take that portrait, but that style, that close up, that looking into a person at that moment, seeing, oh my God. Oh my God. I'm freaking out.
I just saw Angela Reed joined the chat, and we have a couple of confirmations by Amy, by Angie, and by Jen that it was indeed Roswell. And we have comments. Amy wrote, we tend to see more. We have trained our eyes to see the things most people walk by. Steffi joined the chat. Steffi joined the chat. That's not easy to say. Steffi joined the chat. Since I started with photography, I see more beauty in the world. Lynn Arden's highlights also agrees with us, which is always nice. There's the thing, what I realized, and that's also one of these, it might be too big for this conversation, because we all know these, and I'm the first one to really judge that the way people are presented in media, the way these how can you say, how can I put that, we got very, very unrealistic view, especially on women, in the way women are presented in media. So that I just want to make that clear, that what I will say now has nothing to do with that, because I'm the first one to well, not the first one in terms of the first one, but I'm really one of these people who really try to fight against that if it's possible. But what I realized with my own photography, with doing more and more portrait photography lately, that by looking closer, I suddenly, not suddenly, it was a slow way, start to expand your horizon. And now I see, thank you for showing me on the, what do you do, Fern? Oh, okay. Showing, I started to my view on what or who is attractive completely changed, in terms of by looking closer at people, by looking more, what is that person about, seeing all these mannerisms people have, all the little quirks, everything that makes a person a person. And I blame, in the best possible way, photography for that, because we suddenly people become interesting and therefore attractive through their way, their very unique way they are, which is extremely interesting. And I found that this tension, because I don't think that I'm the only person who sees it that way, and I really strongly believe, but maybe that's me being naive, that a lot of especially portrait photographers see it that way, and it must be a terrible thing for them having to produce these standardized beauty shots that they can sell. But that just as a thought.
Well, it's funny. There's two things. By the way, the photographer of that Greta Garbo picture, I don't know if everybody saw it, but it's George Hurrell, the who was again a famous Hollywood portrait photographer. So there's two things about what you said about seeing that, expanding your understanding of what beauty is. One of them is, for me, and again, it goes back to the spirituality. The older I'm getting, the more I accept individual expressions, and the more I just try to accept, not to tolerate, because to me, tolerate still says, this is stupid, this is crazy, this is whatever, but I'm going to put up with it. Accepting is just that. You accept. Doesn't mean you agree, doesn't mean you support it even, but this is where you are. Let's move on. Once I've started to learn, and I'm still learning and will always be learning because I have my prejudices and I have my ways of seeing things and what I like and don't like. But that, in a sense, feeds into my photography, feeds into the portrait photography, feeds into the photographs that I take of people on the street. And that, what I see in the photographs and the way I look at the person, and I try to see the person when I take the picture, and when I try to see the person while I'm working on post. Because that's another thing. That's one of the reasons I love doing the editing. Because when I'm doing the editing, and I feel the same way, because what little editing I've done of video has been interviews. You get to see, and you get to study, and you get to see over and over and over again, and dig deep into what you're seeing while you're editing. So you get to you know what I mean? You get to appreciate all of the levels. So to me, that feeds into the spirituality sense of it by learning to accept. And that learning to accept and that spirituality takes me back to the editing and the learning to appreciate and the way I see people when I take their picture. And it's this circular thing that again, it's me. I don't, but and again, it goes back to the original question that Gia asked about, why do you take pictures? Because it's something that I do. It's something that I feel the need to do. And it's something that for some reason it's feeding, and it's feeding off of, and it's then feeding my spirituality, that's the way I see the world. And so, yeah, it's fascinating. The other thing I was gonna say something else. Anyway, I thought that was, yeah.
Yeah, but that's absolutely what I meant as well. Not only with people, if you look at the world in a way, if you look closer, I mean, we all tend to rather see the negative. And if you're like me, going around town with buses and trains a lot, you hear people complaining all of the time about everything, right? And it seems that if you just listen to people, it seems that the world is going to collapse anytime soon, and everyone is just being tortured by everything, and everyone has it bad and everything. And the thing is, so just like, if you look at, of course, yes, might be, if we look at our lifetime, we might have it worse than 10 years ago. I don't know. I don't see it, but maybe I'm too young for that. I don't see it that way. I'm happier now than I was 20 years ago, and certainly than I was 30 years ago. but if we look at history, we never, humanity never had it as good as we have it now. That's a fact. And everyone says it's just going downhill. It's just going down, and everything is bad. And if we're living in the worst times ever. It's just not true. It
Two
is.
things.
It's just.
So two things. One, you're not old enough to remember. October Missile Crisis. Okay, enough. Right there. Let's just leave it right there.
No, I get.
No. I mean, to your point about that we're better off. I mean, if you want to talk about the past, the October Missile Crisis, the world could have ended. So it doesn't get any worse than that.
The world could have ended any second in the past if a meteor strikes. So what I was referring to is that all in all, less people die of hunger than 15, 20 years ago. Less people die of diseases that were like. It's just we have it much better than 15, 20, 50, 100, 200, 500, 1,000 years ago.
Yes.
All in all, no question about that. Things are like, yes, with one push of a button, the whole world can blow up. But it's just a matter of where does that power to end the world has shifted to. It has shifted to. It's always when I talk, Fern says we run out of.
No, it's not that. No, I mean it's fascinating, but it's 1:30. We've been on this thing for an hour and a half. Enough already. I need to go to the bathroom. Oops. Anyway, go ahead.
It doesn't matter how the world ends, whether it ends with a meteor strike or with a push of a button. It's just if the world ends, it ends, and it's just if nobody's there to blame anyone later. So why do we sit there and complain about stuff that we can't change anything? And if we can change anything in terms of we don't want to have that person sitting on the button, then it's. In our Western world, we have the possibility to do something against that. And it's just like, well, I can't do anything. I'm just one person. Yeah, but then we have to kind of find others. And there's always a possibility. And maybe not now and maybe not tomorrow, but in a couple of weeks or months, we can do something. But that's not what I meant to say. In what I saw with photography, by looking closer, that's also like you mentioned. I started to simply accept things and not judge everything, because of course I can complain if I drag my camera up that hill or up that mountain and then there are clouds everywhere. I can complain. I wanted to shoot that sunset from the mountaintop, and now I went there. So no, it is as it is. And taking that, trying to make not the best out of it, but just taking it as it is. And using what we have in terms of, okay, I have this camera with that lens, and so I can only take these kinds of shots. And well, I probably never took shots with that camera and that lens combination with weather like that. So I will do it now. And if I can't, if none of the shots are any good, then it is like that. And I learned something, that it doesn't work that way. So that's what I realized over the last couple of years. And I became so much more relaxed when, okay, then I go out, I want to go take photos today, but well, I come home and have one shot, and which is nothing special, or I have two, or I have none. So it's about the process of that all, and not stressing yourself out. And that's why I started a 365 challenge. That's why the blog is called T-Boom 365, because it started as a 365 challenge. But I stopped doing it because I was always looking for photos to take, and I need to take a photo for that, because today I need to take a photo for, and it just stressed me out, and
That's it. It takes the fun out of it.
it takes the fun out of it. And
Yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
what I said before with analog photography, that it takes the fun out of photography for me, that I have to wait, that I don't have the flexibility that I have with digital. And yes, the photos might, it's a matter of taste, right? Some people like analog photos better, and certainly if you have a great print of an analog photo, it always looks better, more pleasing to our eyes. Maybe that's a biology thing. Maybe it's just that we're used to it, than a digital print or a print of a digital photo. But for me, it's not worth the stress. It's not worth buying film. I don't want to buy film if I can take photos with. I mean, film. If you shoot that many photos as I do, and that's what it's just my approach. Of course, I could do things differently, but I don't want to. And why would I do something that I don't want to do? It's the same discussion as I had a lot on Tumblr. Like, why don't you? Why you never on PWS? I never see this photographer. I never see that photographer. And so, why we reblog what we like? Why would we reblog something that we don't like? We don't say this photographer is bad just because we don't have it on the blog as often. So we why would
People
we
ask you
want
that?
yeah, a lot. Oh,
Really?
oh, a lot.
Oh, nobody pays attention to
No,
us then, because
I have
nobody. I
no
mean, we had the one discussion that I posted that was, that was absolutely. I mean, I understood, and the one photographer asking, why haven't I been replugged? And I just got another one, but wow, nobody pays attention to LuxLit, which is fine. I'm not complaining. Because how do you answer that?
idea.
Except by saying this is what we. Yeah.
Apparently, perceive that it is some kind of. See, I really have no idea. And maybe it plays into that. I don't really understand that. I just saw we have a comment on the post on PWS, on the post of that video. Ulrich Kurt wrote, "We definitely need more experts commenting our video." So I don't know. We definitely, yes, I agree. We definitely need more experts. We need experts, because I don't think that I'm an expert in anything other than other than clicking on broadcast this. And I'm pretty good in that, clicking that one button.
Really? You don't think of yourself as an expert in some things related to video or videography or photography? You don't?
Not an expert. I think I know a lot, and I think I'm a pretty good videographer. I think I'm a pretty decent photographer. And we have another comment on the chat. Frank's taking photographs, loving photography. For me, the photograph that will mean the most to me is one I to be a part of, whether it's foreign to me or familiar. Yes, absolutely. I can absolutely can. Well, I think I'm. What would you call an expert? I know the more I learn about anything, the more I realize that I don't know by far not
Well,
enough.
yeah, yeah.
So there's always one person, at least one or five or 500 people who know more and that I consider to be experts. And so you can ask me everything about video, I guess. So I will probably be able to help you with everything. I think I know a lot about photography, technically, and also from an artistic side. Don't ask me about names, because I hardly can remember my own name.
I want to forget your name too, but
No, it's not possible. And
That's interesting though, because because it's just the whole idea. I mean, I know I'm expert in certain things, but that doesn't mean, to me, an expert doesn't mean that I know everything at all. Quite the opposite. But I know more than enough to be able to dive in and have the conversation and learn from it.
right. See, I don't talk about things that I think that I don't know enough about to be able to talk about. Hans Holz right now. Hans Holz, you're blocked. Because yeah, we're gonna remove Hans Holz.
Why?
Because Hans Holz is comparing people with other people, and we don't want that.
Oh. Oh, it's getting on the personal side?
Nah, it's got it on the political and religious side, so we don't want that on this chat.
No. Well, that's what we said at the very beginning, that this is not about religion at all, that it's spiritual. Well, we defined it, so maybe this person came in late, which is fine.
Came in late, and we didn't talk about politics, and we certainly. And just for the record, for those who saw the comments, I would have deleted or blocked this person even if he would have written the exact opposite of what he wrote, because this is not about politics in this one. And I don't care because we're not talking about who's a good president or not.
Oh, no. All right. So on that note, talking about what we're not talking about, why don't we just stop talking? It's an hour and 41 minutes. And we were talking before that for like 20 minutes. So
right. And just in case I came across a bit off today, I'm not drunk or anything. I just have terrible headaches today, and I can hardly talk. So I think,
wow,
that's why I let you talk.
Alrighty then. So let's say goodbye.
Let's say goodbye. Thank you all for being on this show. I hope I didn't forget anyone. I hope I didn't forget any comment to I hope I didn't forget to read any comments. And it was a bit of an unusual topic today. I hope nevertheless that you had it was interesting and that you had fun. And I'm a bit sad that nobody joined the conversation. Maybe Hans Holz would have wanted to join, but then I had to kick him off. So so in let's stop this. I'm sorry, I need to take a painkiller. So thank you, Fern, thank you all on the chat, and bye bye till next time.